start off by saying congratulations on this album. This is an absolutely fantastic album. We've been playing King Ghost on our show, and it has gone absolutely crazy with the amount of requests we've had for it. So, congratulations.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, really, I'm really proud of that song. Really proud of that song. I'm glad to hear it's going down well, mate. Yeah, cheers.
What is it about that song that you love so much? Like, I found listening to it, I've been listening to it over and over and over, but what is it about the song that makes you fall in love with it as the songwriter?
That's a very difficult question to answer because there's so much that's kind of intangible about what makes a song so affecting. And you know, sometimes when a song comes out like that, I'm as surprised as anyone, you know, because I write songs all the time. And sometimes they just take on a life of their own. And I think there's something, you know, on a more kind of objective level, what I'm so proud about with this song is that it sounds like nothing else I've ever done. But at the same time, it sounds completely like me. And that's kind of a hard trick to pull off. Because, I mean, this track doesn't even have a guitar on it. I mean, this is almost unheard of for me. It's purely electronic. There are no guitars on it. It's relatively sparse, and yet it still has a very strong emotional kind of resonance to it that I think people associate with my best work. And a lot of people, of course, think electronic music is going to be very cold and unemotional, and I think this belies that fact. You know, it's a very emotional, beautiful, transcendent experience. I think, you know, that's the way I feel about it, and I'm so proud of it. And I couldn't analyze it any more than that, really. It just came out so perfect.
Yeah. Was there a conscious decision not to use guitar, or, as you said, did the song just take a life of its own and it sounded perfect once you laid down the electronics for it?
Well, excuse me. It wasn't conscious in the sense that I think you mean, but it was conscious in one way, because I think when I came to write the music for this album, I found when I picked up the guitar, which is the instrument, of course, that I'm most associated with, although I'm no great guitar player, but it's certainly the instrument that I think most people would think of as being my instrument. When I picked up the guitar, I just didn't feel like there was anything left for me to say with that instrument. I felt like I'd kind of done it all before. And after 25 years in the business, you know, writing predominantly on that instrument, I guess that was kind of inevitable one day. So I found myself gravitating more, I guess more inspired by, more excited by the possibilities of electronic sounds. And the ability for electronic sounds, you know, the potential for electronic sounds to actually sound very human and very emotional and very engaging in that respect. So it was kind of a sort of natural progression. I found myself moving more and more towards the keyboards to find inspiration, to find things that excited me, to find things that I felt suggested lyrics and sort of conceptual ideas, when really all the times in the past it would have always been the guitar. So that, in a sense, was a bit of an ending of an era for me. Although, you know, there's no reason why I couldn't go back to the guitar on the next album. But right now, I just feel like I was just more inspired by the sound of the keyboards and electronic sounds for some reason.
Do you think this album might even open you up to an even wider audience because of that? Like, I know here in Australia, there's a very there's kind of a thing between electronic music and rock music, and some radio stations will only play tracks if it's got guitar and drums and things like that. Do you think this might open up your music to an even wider audience?
Well, I don't know. You know, listen, that's certainly not something I think about when I'm making the music, obviously. But in retrospect, of course, I always hope. The one thing I would say about this album for me, and this is one of the things I'm most proud about the record, which is it feels like a record that's very much of the now.
Yep.
And I say that because I think some of my previous records have felt perhaps more like homages to the history of music. You know, whether it's 70s conceptual rock music or 80s experimental pop music. There's always been a sense, I guess, of homage to the past. And I don't feel that with this record. I feel this record is completely of the now. It feels very contemporary. It feels very fresh. And so in that respect, I wonder if potentially it can cross over to a bigger audience. I mean, I always hope that. I always hope that with all my records, that the songs and the emotional quality of the music will kind of, reach an audience. But it's not happened for me yet. But, never know. Maybe on this record, maybe this is the one. Who knows?
Yeah, I really think that it is an album for now. Like, one of the reasons why I think King Ghost has done so well here is that we're in a really weird situation at the moment where our country, or our state that I'm in right now, we've been in lockdown for 7 months. We're just slowly coming out of that lockdown now because we've had 10 days of 0 corona cases. But people aren't really celebrating it. Like, they're reflecting on what this year's been, but they're not celebrating it. So do you think that track kind of captures the mood of how everybody is feeling around the world right now?
I think so, yeah, because the one thing that the album, if I had to sort of sum up what I think the album is predominantly about, I mean, the songs are about different things, obviously, but there is a theme that runs through the album, and I would say that is about self-identity in all its various forms, insecurity, self-obsession, self-belief, self-awareness, which is something I feel has been very much thrown into relief by the massive sort of explosion in the last 20, 25 years, social media, how social media has created a kind of a more self-centered version of the human species, because most of us are on social media, and social media tends to focus us much more on ourselves, our situation, the way that we're reflected back in the mirror of social media by people liking our posts or following our feeds or viewing our videos or TikTok videos or whatever it is we're doing. There's definitely a sense that everybody now is kind of a celebrity in their own little universe, and that is it's very interesting to me how that's almost changed the course of the evolution of the human species. It's almost like we've been knocked off course by this revolution in the internet and social media. And it's fascinating the good and bad things that has sort of done to the human species. I mean, I was talking earlier to someone else about this, the fact that people nowadays, I don't know if it's like this in Australia, but certainly following the American election or following the whole Brexit situation in the UK last year, the way people have become so much more belligerent and they see everything in very black and white terms, and they get terribly, terribly angry and upset if somebody has a different opinion or perspective on the world that they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's been really fed by the internet, by social media.
Yeah.
It's all kind of fed into our own sort of self-perception, self-identity. So I think there's a lot of insecurity around now. A lot of people that don't quite know who they are, where they fit into this world, and of course, lockdown and corona and all these things have just added to that sense of displacement and disillusion and insecurity. It's certainly a very, very strange time we're living through, no question.
That's definitely something we've had here at the moment. So our Premier, Daniel Andrews, who came up with the plan to defeat corona, depending on who you ask on the street, some people call him a dictator, others are calling him a hero, because we've relatively come out of it with only 800 deaths. But yeah, it's really interesting because if you read social media, it sounds like the whole state hates him, but then they go and do polls and find out that he's got 72% support. So people are starting to question, is social media really as reliable as we think it is?
Well, I think the problem there is that the people that tend to go on forums and online and spread hate tend to be the ones that shout the loudest.
Yeah.
If I could sort of make this analogous with the world of music, for example, I could go and do a show to 1,000 people, and maybe there's 2 people in that audience that really don't enjoy the show for whatever reason. Maybe their girlfriend, they've had a row with their girlfriend, or they don't like the sound, or it's not their kind of music. It's almost inevitable that those 2 people out of 1,000 that didn't like the show will be the ones that go and make the biggest review and the biggest noise on the internet the day after, because negativity just makes more of an impression. Bad news travels much faster than good news. So I think that's one of the problems with social media, is it gives a kind of exaggerated perspective that everyone out there is incredibly negative and there's nothing good to say about anything. Most people just enjoy, like with music, most people just go to the concert, they enjoy the concert, they have a few beers, they go home, they put the record on, and they don't feel obliged to go and rant online about how amazing the show was. It's the two guys that hated it that are the ones that feel obliged to. And I think that's another thing about social media that really gives a very, very distorted impression of the world. And we've been having that for certainly the last 5 years. I think it's really accelerated, with the sort of whole Trump approach of using bullying tactics and belligerence and spreading hatred and unrest to try and make your point. And it works to an extent, and that's what's worrying, is that it does seem to work. At least it works it worked for Donald Trump for 4 years.
Yep. So, Stephen, I know I'm rapidly watching the time countdown as well, so I'd love to ask before I go, though, how difficult has it been making an album and then bringing an album out mid-pandemic? Like, that's something that we've never had to do before, so what's that been like for you?
It's been tough, yeah. It's one of those funny things, because originally it was supposed to come out in June, and I had a meeting with my management and record company in March, and we thought, okay, let's delay the album till January. There's no way in a million years the pandemic will still be happening in January 2021, and we really believed it. We really thought there's no way this could, and here we are. And of course, it's still raging just as badly as it ever was. But I'm not going to delay the album again. Obviously, it's going to come out. It's tough. It's tough to get people to engage at this moment in time. I don't think people quite know what they want, and they certainly don't quite know what they want from creative people. Maybe some people just want sort of very joyous, banal pop music that makes them feel good. Maybe other people want music that's going to make them feel depressed and miserable, and they can kind of empathise with. I don't know really how I fit into that. It's been tough to get people's attention. Obviously, there are so many other things that people are distracted by right now. I mean, who cares about just a pop record, in this time?
Yeah.
Except on the other hand, I think in some respects, music is and should be more important than ever at this time. This is what people need in a way,
Definitely. Well, mate, I know we are right out of time, but I want to say thank you so much for coming on our show today. It has been an absolute pleasure. We've fallen in love with this track, and I know our listeners are going to love the album as well. So congratulations, and hopefully we get to see you in Australia for another tour once everything's settled back down.
I really hope so. Fingers crossed. Nice to speak to you too, Dave.
You
Have
too.
a great day, mate.
You too, mate.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.